Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the MTA Bus Operations Committee meeting for December 17, 2012. Before we start, I'd like to have a moment of silence for the victims of what happened last Friday in Newtown, Connecticut. I will mention this at the board meeting on Wednesday. We actually have 9 employees who actually live in Newtown. None of them were directly affected by what happened, but I think that's an overstatement on my part. Everyone had an impact of what happened there. So if we can just have a moment of silence. Thank you. We have one public speaker, Mr. Murray Bowden. Murray?
Good morning. My name is Murray Bowden. I had a idea what I was going to talk about this morning, but then I realized that what's going to happen in this meeting is incredibly important. This committee is going to be closed down. The ability to make that kind of change in our society today is overlooked. There are rules that have been in place for many, many years, and everybody assumes that's the way it has to be. But looking over the way the MTA is structured, there was a realization that buses, whether run by New York City Transit or run by someone else, are buses. And so the change being made to put all the buses in the same place turns out to be incredibly important. And the ability to actually make that happen is quite difficult. There are all kinds of entrenched organizations of one sort or another that have to be brought together to realize that the way we do things in 2013 is different than the way we did them 10 or 20 years ago. So I missed you last week, Darrell. I hope I will have the opportunity to work with you in the future. And I do have one suggestion that's a little new. You have on the side of the buses that says a little logo that says MTA Bus. That logo should only say MTA. Everybody recognizes a bus as a bus. That's not so funny. You do have a logo that's well recognized. That MTA logo should be on the trains and not with Metro North after it, or LI or R. Your brand is MTA. It's an important brand. It's a well-recognized brand. And that's the brand that should be used for everything and not qualified by buses or Metro North or anything else. And I want to wish you all a very healthy and happy New Year, and I'll see you in January.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. Moving forward with the committee agenda, I ask for a motion to approve the minutes from the November 26th meeting. Motion has been made and it has been seconded. Any questions, changes? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Are there any changes to the committee's work plan, Tom?
No changes.
No changes. And let me introduce the president of MTA Bus, Darrell Arick. Darrell?
Good morning. In addition to our regular updates this month, Dawn Penock of New York City Transit, Vice President of Human Resources, will provide a report at the end of this session on efforts being taken to address underutilization of minorities and women within MTA Bus. But until that time, I'd like to introduce John Kivlahan to give the updates on operations.
Good morning. The performance highlights for the month of October 2012 and the past 12 months are on pages 8 and 9 of the committee book. I'll start with fleet reliability. For the month of October, the combined MDBF was 5,275 miles, 48% greater when compared to October 2011 levels. This represents 2 consecutive months of performance above 5,000 miles, an accomplishment never before achieved in the history of bus operations. Preliminary November data indicates we will achieve 3 consecutive months at this level. When looking at our performance over a rolling 12-month period, the combined MWF was 4,489 miles, or an improvement of 36% when compared to the prior 12-month period. Next, I'll talk about our service indicators for the month of October. The percentage of scheduled pullouts for the AM and PM peak periods were 99.8 and 99.9%, up 1 and 0.6% respectively. The percent of completed trips was 99.3%, up 1%. When looking at our performance over a rolling 12-month period, AM and PM pullouts were 99.2 and 99.6% respectively, improvements of 0.7 and 0.4%. The percent of completed trips was 98.8%, an improvement of 0.9%. That completes our operations report for the month of October. Are there any questions? I'd like to introduce Steve Vidal for the safety report.
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
And for some reason, I've never focused on this before. The service for the buses is just basically pulling out in the morning and coming back in at the end of the day?
No, those are just 2 key periods. Those are our peak periods. So it's the 2 points where the maximum amount of vehicles are out on the road. And it's just one of many indicators that we use.
I would expect that. I'm still not understanding what the pullout is. Forgive me.
That's a measurement of both equipment and employees coming to work and getting the buses out on the street on time.
Right.
And we still look at weight assessment and on-time performance.
Sort of what I'm getting at. So we've never really looked at weight assessment or on-time performance in this committee? And
We do quarterly.
We do,
quarterly.
yes.
Okay. And that same quarterly information will be available in the transit committee.
Absolutely.
That's part, Jeff, that's part of the PES survey that the next one will be in the March meeting.
Sorry about that.
Any further questions?
Just to follow up on Jeff's question, do you also do a midpoint along the route check for on-time performance?
Well, completed trips would probably be the most all-encompassing because it monitors every trip made by a bus all day.
Right, but
not
that's-
just during the peak
A completed
periods.
trip still doesn't tell you how you did at the midpoint, though, necessarily.
No, it doesn't. So what we're looking at now, as we roll out bus time with GPS tracking, we are beginning to look at the route in its entirety. So in time, probably by the beginning of 2014, the whole system should be rolled out with bus time. And shortly thereafter that, we will start to publish. But right now, we're starting to manipulate and study that data and use it to manage weight assessment and on-time performance much better than we did in the past. So currently, we have the Bronx and Staten Island that we're actively involved with.
So it's kind of like the A Division's ATS, getting real absolute information.
Right, but we don't have the obstacles that the B Division has. It's rolling out as
Sure.
each and every day.
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, excuse me, on this, yeah, I know that quarterly you do produce weight assessment evaluations for certain bus lines as a key indicator. Doesn't that show the service provided throughout the route on those lines as indicators? That's only a quarterly. I know it's only a quarterly report.
Right. Those are what we reported, and it's actually it's semi-annual. Is the weight assessment? We produce them internally quarterly. It's weight assessment on the routes, measured at various points on the routes. That has historically been done with a sampling with the human being on the corner watching the buses go by. So now, as bus time rolls out, we're able to do it. Right.
I just want to make sure everyone knew that those things you've been rolling them out, and I've seen them. I just want to make sure everyone else is aware that you've been doing that as, on your own, without bus time.
Good morning. Our comments on October's customer and employee safety performance can be found on page 10. On a regional basis, the 12-month rate for combined bus collisions per million miles traveled across the two bus agency is 4.5% lower in the right direction than it was in the prior 12-month period. The 12-month rate for regional collision injuries per million miles is slightly higher than the 12-month prior period, up 0.9%. For the current reporting period, customer accidents and customer accident injuries continue to be up slightly on a 12-month basis. It is important to note that both of these indicators reflect significant improvements when comparing October 2012 to October 2011. Customer accidents are improved by 27.2%, and customer accident injuries are improved by 23.2%. Finally, the 12-month average rate for employee on-duty lost time accidents is 3.4% lower in the right direction on a regional basis. Contributing to the 12-month improvement was our performance in October 2012, where we improved lost time accidents per 100 employees by 26.3% compared to October of 2011. This concludes our monthly safety report. Are there any questions? I'd like to introduce Tom Charles for Paratransit.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning. Paratransit report is on page 12. For the month of October 2012, accessorized paratransit ridership was down 3.6% compared to October 2011 levels. This is largely due to the cancellation of service at the end of October because of Hurricane Sandy. 12-month ridership levels were up by 6.9%. Over the 12-month period ending October 2012, there was a 2.1% increase in the monthly average of accessorized requests for service. The favorable no-show trend continued in the month of October as accessorized passenger no-shows declined by 16.3% compared to October 2011 levels. This completes the paratransit report.
Are there any questions?
I think I'm about to hit a third rail politically on the subject of paratransit. Question number one. Do you charge at all for paratransit service to the rider?
Yes, we have the same local bus subway fare of $2.25 per trip.
So they do pay for the rides.
Correct.
And as I understand it, the numbers indicate that well over $300 million of deficit each year is incurred by MTA in terms of providing that kind of service. Is that essentially correct?
That's how much the MTA paid for last year in 2011.
After whatever reimbursement it gets to the city.
Correct.
And I do know that the chairman has made a major effort trying to cut into the costs through the use of the subway vehicle. Is there any other activity that can be undertaken, to your knowledge, by MTA to reduce the scope of this subsidy, assuming the validity of that contract, which the chair did send to me, and which I've got a bunch of lawyers at my office poring over to see if they can find some hole in it, because it's an enormous cost that the MTA is bearing. Is there anything else that we are doing that can cut into that?
Well, we have been, over the past 3 years, making inroads in using non-dedicated transportation, which is at a much lower cost than our accessorized dedicated service. We have been looking at ways of bringing in efficiencies through our scheduling and through a new initiative that we're bringing out this year, an accessorized Metro card to incentivize customers to make use of bus and subway. We have our feeder service where the trip itinerary is not completely door-to-door. It's where we can bring someone to a bus stop, still meet their conditions, their restrictions in traveling, and still make use of the bus to deliver them to their destination as required by ADA. So we've been taking a number of measures to bring our cost structure down.
What gives me this pause is that the sum hoped to be recovered by these increases, the sum that we are subsidizing now, is something on the order of 3/4 of the amount going into paratransit.
It's much more.
Okay. I guess we'll have to fight.
Could I just add a couple things, Chuck? I think like 3 years ago, and Tom, correct me where I'm wrong, I'm going to be very general. The average cost per ride was roughly $60 a ride.
Right.
through a number of measures that Tom alluded to, not to mention bringing in all the contracts and renegotiating all the contracts in midterm. I think it was midterm or right about that. Increasing the yellow taxis, which you could see the number in the financial plan. The feeder service you mentioned, which I do want to ask you about. I think we've reduced the cost of the ride to under $40 a ride, roughly 40, maybe 45.
About 45, yeah.
So, I mean, this is a number we focused on for the last 3 years. Tom's done. They've tried all new things, and the latest thing, which is the free ride on the service, I think was ultimately a very good next step. I'd like to add two questions. One was, in fact, how efficient the feeder service was, because I know there was a lot of concern about taking the next step and the precedent that was setting. And second, one of the things that I thought should go along with all the cost-cutting measures we put in place was maybe either a reinvestment or a further evaluation into the program that assists riders to use the fixed route system. I know we have one. It doesn't get talked about as much as I think it probably should, especially in light of all the cuts that we've been making from those folks in the disability community that were very concerned about the cuts. They want to use the fixed service system, and we do have a program in place to assist them to do that. So I want to know how those two things were working in 2013.
Sure. Well, the feeder right now is working well, but it's very limited in that we only have the what I call the inbound trip from the home to a destination. We're going to be testing in spring the reverse, someone coming back from their destination to be picked up at a bus stop, brought home. And there's other types of feeder service that we're still engaged. Right now we're primarily with accessible bus service. We haven't touched the subway yet. So as we develop this and move on, we do have to be careful of the type client we choose, but we have been able to select a group that does take feeder service, have accepted those trips and those itineraries. As far as travel training is very limited because it's really a one-on-one type training. It's difficult to get large groups. However, with our introduction of the free fare, we're looking to use that same consultant to do a mass orientation of customers, new customers, to make them aware of making use of bus and subway instead of entirely door-to-door service.
I think the cost of, I forget the term that you used, of that program for training is very, very small. And the amount of savings that we've gotten for the free reduced fare and all those other things, we should really look at making that dollar go an extra, even longer, an extra step. Because I don't know how much you spent on the program. For some reason, 10 million sounds in my head. I could be really high or really low. I don't know why that popped in my head. But it's a massive system. And it's a massive program, and I think we should do what we can to invest in that program.
Mr. Capelli.
Just to piggyback on what Jeffrey had said, because he and I kind of one-twoed this issue for a couple of years, I agree that we've made great strides in bringing the cost of this program down, and Mr. Charles has done some terrific and innovative things to do that. This several years ago was a disaster in terms of the amount of subsidies that were needed to operate the system, and it became difficult for us to even talk about it until we could get the cost down to something that was, in fact, reasonable. I think Mr. Merdler's comments now, though, however, are at least useful in, I'm often asked, what do you do with the money? Okay, you guys get so much money, and the fact of the matter is, I don't think that the public has an understanding of just how much money this particular program costs us to operate that is subsidized by other aspects of our operations. And nobody wants to cut services for the handicapped or the elderly, and it has to be paid from somewhere. And so I think that it's useful to put it in that perspective. And if Mr. Merdler can find a way to change the terms and conditions, I'd be willing to listen to that, and I think as we all would. But it is important for the conversation of where does the money go, because a lot of money goes in this direction. Thank you.
Mr. Merdler?
Thank you very much. Here's my concern, and it really is a serious concern. If you have 300 million, 350 million going each year toward this program from MTA funds after the city has provided some reimbursement on it, this is a very expensive program. And this is an example of the vice of unfunded mandates. It is also an example of something that unless people of goodwill like you and people of imagination like the chair put a brake to it, is going to be something that is just going to swallow up everything we're doing. It's a huge percentage of the entire fare increase yield. To the extent that you can do something to make it more efficient in terms of maybe the answer is we subcontract the whole thing out for a flat sum and let somebody else worry about it. That's not necessarily an answer. I agree. But it seems to me we got to do something about this before it swallows us up.
Just as a bit of background, one of the main reasons why that contract, and I think you're referring to the MTA and the city contract, is that it was also meant to be an impetus to get the MTA to start moving to make the system a lot more accessible. And so you have that dynamic there as well that I don't want to overlook. It's one of the reasons why the feeder service was so intriguing is as the system and the bus systems become so much more accessible, there hasn't been any way to pair that. And it is an extremely difficult job. I recognize that. It's probably taken so much longer to get off the ground than we anticipated because I don't know how you do it. And then you have the curb cuts and it's complicated. But there is that dynamic there.
I was afraid of this. Mr. Page?
This innovation of saying that if you're entitled to this kind of transportation but choose not to use it and use the regular system, you can ride free. I mean, that's a marvelous subsidy of $2.25, but I would say a sad failure in getting the users of the service to participate in any way in realistically trying to contain the cost, which is not $2.25, but is in fact $45. And it's just, I mean, a sad failure.
Any other? Yes.
Just one. Could we charge more?
No. Agreement
Right.
under the agreement with the City of New York, we cannot charge more.
Okay.
It's limited to whatever we charge
fare.
for regular fare, unless it was renegotiated.
And I believe,
Right. Unless the mayor. That's right. That's. I think the provision is unless the mayor agrees.
The federal law, I believe, caps it at double the amount
Two
of
times
a
two
transit
times the
share.
regular fare.
The contract with the city includes this other component.
In 1995, when I became the city budget director, I was told by a fellow named Murray, who helped part of the negotiation of this, he was very, very proud of this contract for a reason. Just so you know, from a subsidy point of view, Chuck, this is subsidized more than Metro North is. If you look at the amount of operating deficit of Metro North, it's not here. So.
To be told this so that they don't properly.
I agree. When I go to various different places where people want to know where the money is going and what is happening, we do talk about the efficiencies we have here, but we also talk about the amount. That's why I knew it was $300 million last year. It's going to be slightly less this year due to the various efficiencies that we've started. But it is very important that they understand where this money is coming from. Moving forward to Tom, you're completed. All right. Tom Del Sorbo for the financial and procurement reports.
Good morning. The October ridership report is shown on page 11 of the committee book. While the Sandy-related service shutdown at the end of October negatively affected and impacted total ridership levels for the month, average weekday ridership actually increased by 1.4% when compared to October 11 levels after subtracting the days without service. MTA bus average weekday ridership rose by 1.9% in October 2012 as compared to the prior October, and New York City Transit bus increased by 1.2% for the same period. Average weekend ridership in October increased at both New York City Transit and MTA bus by 0.6 and 2.7% respectively. Express bus ridership on weekdays increased at New York City Transit by 2.1%, but decreased slightly by 0.5% at MTA Bus. Moving on to the expense and revenue report as summarized on page 13, year-to-date October 2012 farebox revenues are lower than forecast for both New York City Transit and MTA Bus by 1.6 and 0.8% respectively. Overall, fixed route farebox revenues are lower than the forecast of $897 million by $13.4 million through October. Over $8.5 million, or two-thirds of that shortfall, occurred in the month of October. On the expense side, combined October 2012 year-to-date non-reimbursable accrued expenses reflect a favorable variance of $27 million, or 1.2%. As New York City Transit Bus and MTA Bus are favorable to forecast by 25.7 and 1.3 million respectively. The performance against forecast is a combination of favorable non-labor expenses of 49 million offset by unfavorable labor expenses of 22 million. Favorable non-labor expenses are mainly due to the timing of maintenance contracts, materials and supplies, lower than anticipated fuel expenses, and the use of lower cost taxis and vouchers for paratransit service contracts. Labor expenses were unfavorable by 22 million as a result of overtime, payroll, and pension costs. The last item in the finance section is the quarterly update on overtime. All agencies have been asked to provide this to their operating committees for non-reimbursable overtime performance this month to include October results. Now, for bus operations, year-to-date through October, our combined non-reimbursable overtime was 16.2 million, or 10.3 higher than the mid-year forecast of 156.3 million. This reflects both scheduled and unscheduled overtime costs. The main driver for the unfavorable year-to-date overtime expenses are related to maintenance efforts begun in late 2011 to improve fleet reliability and reverse the negative MDBF trend. These overtime costs also included preventive maintenance work that was done to maintain the MDBF improvements during the summer months. The maintenance investment accounts for more than half of the 16 million overtime overrun, and as you've heard, has improved bus MDBF over last year's performance after more than a year-long decline. We've also seen a very marked reduction in road calls and unscheduled maintenance work as a result. Bus operator vacancies and the resulting absentee coverage, as well as traffic delays, accounted for the remainder of the overtime overrun. The hourly and supervisory overtime overruns have been offset partially in non-operating employee groups. To alleviate the bus operator staffing shortages that result in overtime to provide our service, classes of newly hired bus operators have been scheduled every 2 weeks through December, and year-to-date we've hired over 800 bus operators. We continue to remain aggressive in filling vacancies and also attempting to improve availability by implementing safety programs to reduce injuries on duty, as well as addressing attendance-related availability issues. That concludes the regular finance and ridership reports. Any questions?
Are there any questions?
Just a quick one.
Sure.
You mentioned filling vacancies. When you have a vacancy, does that person's runs get immediately filled by another part-time until you hire a full-time, or how does that work? Or does that run lost then for the day, or a few days? Or?
No, we have in each one of our garages, we have what we call an extra list, which is the relief population. So to the extent that we can, we immediately fill those runs.
Andrew, we have an extra list, and we also have vacation relief that varies throughout the year. That's sort of the basic fill-in. If we have availability shortfalls, then it could be overtime, or the run may not go out.
You recall I'm trying to negotiate part-time situation with the unions, which, good luck. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Last thing. The day after Sandy, the day when there were no subways but buses were out there and you could hardly get on one.
The Wednesday.
That Wednesday. Are any ridership, since you don't have fares, are any ridership estimates done for that day? I mean, that day was legendary.
There is nothing reflected in the official statistics we just read. I will lean to the operators to see if there's anything that might have been captured independently of that, but the official statistics do not have anything related to that.
We was just at max capacity and then some.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't block the box, it was block the borough.
action item.
We have one action item.
Okay, this month's agenda includes the 2013 final proposed budget for MTA Bus that begins on page 49 of the book. The Department of Buses 2013 budget was included in the New York City Transit Committee agenda that was discussed earlier.
And approved.
We would ask for the committee's approval on the MTA Bus Company 2013 budget and move it to the Finance Committee.
We have a motion? Moved, seconded? Okay. Any questions, comments? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, procurements. There is just one competitive procurement for the committee's approval this month, representing a total expenditure of $527,000. It's up for approval.
I'll move it. Is there a second? It's been seconded. Any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Service changes, Norm?
Good afternoon. Yeah, just about afternoon, anyway. There's one bus route revision included as an information item in this month's agenda beginning on page 41. This revision affects bus routes Q37, Q10, and QM18 as they operate in South Ozone Park, Queens. To provide more reliable service and avoid traffic delays that we're experiencing, we are revising the travel path of these three routes as they operate at their southern terminus on South Conduit Avenue. This revision would discontinue one low-volume eastbound, southbound bus stop on 130th Street and relocate it about 1 block north, approximately 525 feet, to South Conduit Avenue. This recommended revision would enhance reliability on all three routes and most notably continuing to support Q37 ridership, which has been growing significantly over the past year following the revision to serve the new Resorts World Casino at Aqueduct. Are there any questions on this change?
Comments? Makes sense.
I will now turn the floor over to Dawn Pinnock, NYCT Transit's Vice President of Human Resources, to present the EEO and diversity report regarding efforts to address
Mr. Chairman, just
underutilization.
before we get to on service, just two comments. Number one, I'd like to thank the chairman and Darrell for their response to the request from the veterans community, as well as Senator Schumer and others on the S-53, which I guess you changed the transfer function to allow veterans to be able to get to the VA hospital. Much needed and much appreciated. Thank you both. And then the second, just for as an FYI, I don't think we've discussed it, but you also put up an emergency shuttle service to a fast ferry on the South Shore of Staten Island that was created by FEMA in order to move people on a temporary basis. And again, the response and involvement in that is appreciated. Thank you.
Before we move on, can I just ask gentlemen a question? The bus service restorations that are set to take effect in January, do you have a date in January that those are going back?
The pick dates,
Well, I think the answer, well, first of all, this is only for New York City Transit, but Peter can...
Peter has the pick dates.
Well, I think it's varying by borough. There's Staten Island will be a week later. The other boroughs, it's going to be the 6th.
Sometime
2
between the
weeks.
6th and the 20th.
Yeah. We'll get that information.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Any other questions or comments? All right, Dawn.
Thank you and good morning. My presentation today will focus on the various efforts underway at MTA Bus, as shown on page 65 of the book, being performed in conjunction with Transit's Human Resources Division, the EEO Office, MTA's Department of Diversity and Civil Rights, to improve the representation of underutilized protected groups. And I apologize for being repetitive for those of you who were at the earlier meeting, but New York City Transit handles recruitment and outreach efforts for both Transit and MTA Bus. Since the consolidation of the 7 private bus lines that now comprise the MTA Bus Company, great strides have been made to ensure that MTA Bus Company's workforce is representative of the communities it serves. And as mentioned, New York City Transit handles all recruitment activities and the majority of hiring for MTA Bus. Prior to highlighting the efforts underway to address areas of underutilization identified in the September 30th report, I think it's important to mention that achieving a fully diverse workforce in MTA Bus is a challenging endeavor, or at least in the near term. And that's primarily because at the onset of the consolidation, MTA inherited a workforce that was significantly lacking in diversity. And that legacy staff is still part of our current workforce, and they will remain part of our workforce for years to come. But despite those challenges, Transit's Human Resources Department in partnership with MTA Bus, has made significant progress to increase diversity in job categories where opportunities have remained consistently available over the years. And I'm specifically talking about bus operator titles, maintainer, and supervisory positions. Since Transit Human Resources began to staff the MTA Bus Company in 2006, over 15% of our new hires have been women, of which 54% have been Black, 23% Hispanic, and 8% have been Asian. So far this year, our hiring rate reflects a similar trend. And since January of this year, 12% of our new hires have been women, 47% Black, 22% Hispanic, and 11% Asian. As noted in the committee's book, as a standard practice, Human Resources utilizes a host of communication channels to advertise all examination and employment opportunities for MTA Bus. We're on Facebook and Twitter. We advertise on our subway cards and buses. We distribute examination schedules on MetroCard vans. We attend a host of community events and job fairs. We transmit many email blasts throughout the week, and we also provide job readiness skills and workshops. In addition to our marketing efforts, we've also partnered with several community-based organizations. Previously, I mentioned our partnership with the 100 Hispanic Women. We've also partnered with the Chinese American Planning Council, specifically to address underutilization within the Asian population within MTA Bus. Through these partnerships, we've not only conducted workshops with the group's leaderships and members, but we've also talked about just the importance of jobs within the public sector. We've also worked within the local community. We've gone to churches, local businesses, and various community boards events in order to, once again, talk about work within MTA Bus. We've also worked with our veteran population. As mentioned previously, we have a consistent presence at Fort Hamilton. We're specifically looking at this population to fill some of our vacant bus operator positions within MTA Bus, because we're finding that many of our returning veterans, given some of the work they were assigned while away, those are transferable skills for CDL licenses here. And over 50% of the veterans that we're working with are from communities of color, and they're women. I'd also like to mention that there's been a really significant effort within MTA Bus to create greater transparency and greater objectivity in its interview and selection process. And what I'm referring to is the recent implementation of a development-based interview process for all candidates that apply to positions within MTA Bus and across bus operations. Essentially, any internal candidate that applies for a position sits down with a team of professionals within bus operations, and they're provided what I call an informal development plan, meaning that everyone who applies for a position walks away understanding their strengths, their weaknesses, and in some cases, they're paired up to participate in specific training. I think that it's really important to note that, because what it does is it encourages internal promotions, and it also creates a level of transparency within the MTA Bus Company that I think historically many folks have felt did not exist. So I wanted to put that out there. Lastly, with regard to program monitoring, the MTA Department of Diversity and Civil Rights provides utilization targets and approves all discretionary hires and promotions for the MTA Bus Company. That concludes my presentation, and at this time I'm free to answer any questions.
Dawn, on page 61 with the chart, concerned about the numbers with protective services. Question, these are the folks who, as I understand it, actually are security at the depots, and it's MTA Bus only. Do we know, were these the guys, they are all men, according to the statistics here. They came when we took over the responsibility from the privates and worked with the city?
MTA Bus Security, a couple of the privates had their own workforce, so we inherited them. The rest are all under contract, so they wouldn't be reflected in these figures.
They're not going to be reflected here.
Right, and that's why you see with the new hire figures, the numbers will consistently be very low, since we contract out that service.
We're contracting that out. Okay,
yes.
Fine. All right. Thanks. Are there any other questions? Okay. Conclusion. Darrell?
Okay, so while that...
Thank you very much.
That concludes our agenda. This marks the last Bus Operations Committee meeting, as this committee will be merged into the Transit Committee starting next month. Before we adjourn, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our committee chair, Joe Loda, and all the committee members for their guidance and unwavering support to the operations in the past 2 years. As we reported today, we are achieving some significant progress in our day-to-day performance, and your commitment to our operation has contributed greatly to our success. I also want to extend to each and every one of you a safe and happy and healthy holiday going forward. And with that, I'd like to thank you once again.
Thank you, Darrell. Are there any questions or comments? Adjournment? So moved. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Happy holidays. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, you can come back someday. If it doesn't work out, it's coming back.